Borada, good morning. That will fool some of you and possibly fool the translators because Borada is Welsh for good morning. So I don't know if you've ever spoken Welsh at the IAP before, but if not, I claim the first. As Yuka has said, I'm Barry Hughes. I'm the Chief Crown Prosecutor for Wales. And I would just like to say a big thank you to the IAP for inviting me to speak, and a particularly big thanks to our Portuguese colleagues who have put on a fantastic display so far and have made everyone so very welcome. And I just want to mention that, like Roel yesterday, he mentioned that he had been to Portugal recently, he'd been to Lisbon. And I just wanted to share my experience of a conversation with the Portuguese taxi driver who brought me here from the airport yesterday. Like many taxi drivers, an interesting man. There were two particular aspects which I think are of relevance to us here today. Firstly, he used the journey to tell me about his family, and in particular about his eldest daughter, about whom he is rightly very proud. She is, in my mind, a perfect example of how Europe should operate. She is a girl from Porto. She went to university in Portugal. She qualified after long training as an architect. She's 25 and she lives in Cork in Ireland. She works primarily in Cork and Dublin, but she spends time every month in the Netherlands, and she also works on an oil rig, a platform in the North Sea between England and Denmark. What a fantastic example of working across Europe. Who would want to spoil the boundaries that we've broken down so well? I'm saying nothing more about Brexit. That is not official UK policy, okay? So, I thought that was rather a lovely story. He then went on to talk about something else which may resonate with some of you here. And this is about my sharing with him my trip, like Roel, to Portugal, not to Lisbon, but I said I went to the Algarve in September with my children. And I told him about that, and he said to me very firmly, Algarve is not Portugal. I thought it was. He said, no. Too many tourists, too high prices, too many people. It is not Portugal. He was very emphatic about that. And what that reminded me of is the fact that I live in a United Kingdom, which comprises Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England. And in that United Kingdom, at least two of the countries are trying to get out, and we have three different criminal justice systems. So, it emphasized to me that there are so many things that are different for us, and what we need to do is to focus upon the things that bring us together, which takes me today. So, thank you for inviting me. Before I start on my presentation, I just want to talk a little about the criminal justice system in England and Wales, because it is important for the examples that I'm going to provide of where, in my view, efficiency meets the challenge of rubbing along nicely with the rule of law, which is not easy. And the background to my presentation is also one which I feel will be familiar with many of you. It's the background of very significant financial cuts following the financial crash in 2008. And it is about the way that the English and Welsh criminal justice system rose to meet the challenge of having significantly less funding. So, I'll just tell you about our system. We have two main levels of criminal court. We have the Crown Court, which for many of you might be called the High Court. It's where the most serious crimes are heard. Rape, murder, sexual offences, very serious assaults, major drug supply. About 10% of our work goes to the Crown Court. The Magistrates Court, and the term magistrate is different in England and Wales than it is in many other jurisdictions, but the Magistrates Court is where volume crime is dealt with. 90% of our work goes through the Magistrates Court. Sorts of offences I'm talking about are not minor motoring, not speeding, not parking. Things like drink driving, driving whilst disqualified by a court, but also a very high proportion of domestic violence, of disorder in public areas, theft, minor drugs offences, fraud, and that type of offending. It's volume crime, it's low complexity. The simple rule is that if an offence is not likely to receive more than 6 months imprisonment, it's heard in the magistrate's court. And it's what we call our system of summary justice. And that's important because the example I want to talk to you about is called transforming summary justice. And it's about what we did to deal more effectively and efficiently with volume crime while treating suspects and defendants as fairly as we possibly can. So, it's important to note a couple of other things as well. Firstly, we are different to many of you. We are completely independent of the judiciary, and the judiciary are independent of us. We have an accusatorial system, not inquisitorial. And it is important also to stress, and I must stress this, we are wholly independent of the police. Indeed, we were set up by the UK government as a public prosecution service in 1985, and the reason we were set up was to demonstrate our independence from the police. Before the Crown Prosecution Service existed, the police prosecuted everything themselves, with some miscarriages of justice. So it was a big step in England and Wales to create an independent public prosecution service. Because we have independence from the police, we have no authority over their actions. We are in no position to direct investigations, and nor can we start investigations. All of our work comes to us through the police. We are demand-led. This is good for our display of independence. It's not so good when we want them to do things that we would like them to do. They don't always say yes. Sometimes they will say yes after a lot of talking. What they really mean is no. I guess some of you will be familiar with that. But it places a great importance upon how we influence the police to do what we would like them to do. And so the significance of our relationship with the police is of critical importance to the way we deal with crime, especially volume crime. I don't know how it is in your countries, but in England and Wales, the police are pretty good at dealing with really serious offences. They're not so interested in volume crime. So what I'm going to talk to you about is primarily volume crime. And as I said earlier, this is about how we responded when we had the big financial crash just over 10 years ago. And the UK government sat back and essentially, over the next 5 years, we saw 30%, in fact, 33% of our budget taken away. So we had to work with a financial reduction of just on a third of our budget to deal with the work. And the government of the day asked the criminal justice system to come up with a way of dealing with this. And I ended up being asked to lead on a project called Transforming Summary Justice. And it does what the name says. The idea is to transform the summary justice system. Magistrates' court work, high volume, low complexity. And I was given the role to work across government with the police, with the courts, with the judiciary, with the defence, with prisons, with probation. And the key to this all was how to increase efficiency and effectiveness while maintaining fairness within the rule of law. So it was a nice challenge to be given. Let's see how we've met it. So, transforming summary justice. We call it TSJ. Listening to Roll yesterday and the superfast lane, that I think was called ZSM. Can I stress from the start, this is not the same as the superfast lane that operates in the Netherlands. Our scheme, TSJ, deals only with cases once they reach court. And it's about the preparation we put in before it reaches court, but it is not the superfast lane. It's also not the first time that we've tried to improve our system of summary justice. I just put up there some of the other names for initiatives that have been launched in the past in a blaze of glory and have subsequently crashed and burned, and business has returned to how it was done before. So Glidewell is a High Court judge in England. He came up with a system to transform it all, worked for about a year, then stopped. Neri is a man who was given a knighthood by the Queen for what he did, worked for about 3 years, then stopped. You'll note I have no knighthood yet. Criminal justice, simple, speedy, summary. That was another one. That came on after the others. Worked for about 2 years and stopped. The streamlined process and stop delaying justice, because I'm standing here, you know what happened to them. They didn't succeed. So we've tried to do this many, many times. The intentions behind this were simple. To reduce delay. Delay, I've learned after 30 years of prosecuting, is really one of the corrosive aspects of the criminal justice system. The longer a case lasts, the more there is that can go wrong with it. So to reduce delay, to give you an idea, in the magistrates' courts in England and Wales, we average about 7 to 10 weeks to process a case. If it's a contested case, it can take twice as long. We needed to reduce that. The next one, reduce hearings per case. This was to prevent adjournments. When the prosecution's not ready, when the defence aren't ready, when the cause isn't ready. We had a culture in England and Wales of, if people aren't ready, let's just put it over to another hearing, and then another hearing. So we wanted to bear down upon that. And we wanted an average for cases which are guilty pleas. We set targets. We set a target of 1.5 hearings per case for all guilty pleas. And we set a target of 3 for contested hearings. Those are quite generous. But to put it in context, the average at the time was nearly 2.5 hearings for every guilty plea and over 4 for every not guilty. So we had quite a lot of work to do. And then to increase the number of effective trials, by which I mean trials that start and finish on the day they are supposed to. We have a great many ineffective trials where it comes to court and we're just not ready, and it goes off. And that is of huge inconvenience to victims and witnesses. And I'm more concerned in that context about victims and witnesses than about the cost to the system. England and Wales, we were looking at less than 40% of trials starting on the day. It's dreadful. So that's what we had to bear down upon. We drew up a series of principles, and I have to emphasise here, this was done across the criminal justice system. So I led a group which comprised our Home Office, our Ministry of Justice, the police, critically the defence. We involved defence practitioners because we wanted to make sure we were treating suspects and defendants with fairness. And of course we involved the courts and the judiciary. And we came up with a series of principles which I set out here. The first one, no accident that it's first. High quality police files. Having the right product at the start makes everything else run more smoothly. Then for the prosecutor to undertake early review and preparation, to have efficient court listing, to give the defence sight of the prosecution case at the earliest point in time possible. What we aimed to do was, where we know who defends the suspect, to give them the entirety of the prosecution case 5 days before the first hearing, so they come to court ready. Disclosure, unused material. I'll turn to that in a little more depth later, but we wanted to make sure we give the defence sight of the material which may be of assistance to them, but which we don't want to use as part of the prosecution case before the first hearing, not late in the process. And then digital working. When we started this endeavour about 6 years ago, digital working in England and Wales was really not well advanced. And we saw that to have digital working would make everything work better, and it has. I just wanted to put this quote up because I love it. Martin Luther King Jr. You may have heard the quote before, justice delayed is justice denied. The full quote is justice too long delayed is justice denied. It's in a letter that he wrote from a cell in Birmingham, Alabama. And in that letter, he recognizes here that some delay is inevitable. If we do things too quickly, we will cause injustice. So a degree of delay is acceptable, but not too long. So much of what we have done with TSJ is about reducing delay. We've tried to change the court culture. As we are wholly independent of the judiciary, and they of us, this was difficult. But we wanted to adopt these principles in court. They speak for themselves. They all begin with the letter P because we like alliteration. So positive, productive, professional, problem-solving, and importantly, public confidence. We want the public to have confidence that when it comes to dealing with high-volume, low-complexity crime, we actually know what we're doing, and taking delay out and having cases proceed when they should proceed are critical to public confidence. I'll just deal with disclosure. Disclosure, I guess we all have something similar. We have the evidence upon which the prosecution relies, and then we have everything else the police have collected, which the prosecution doesn't want to use, but we need the defence to have access because there might be something in there which helps with their case, or which, as they see it, undermines the prosecution case. And some of you may have seen that in the United Kingdom over the last 2 years, we have had a pretty major series of disclosure failings. Very high profile, has caused a great deal of damage to the reputation of our criminal justice system. They are nearly all Crown Court cases, but the impact is felt in the Magistrates' Court with summary justice as well. And when we drew up the principles for TSJ, we had disclosure at the heart of it. What we did before TSJ was we would give the defence disclosure only after they had pleaded not guilty, sometimes a long time after. And in order to prepare for transforming summary justice, we had to go to both houses of Parliament, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, to bring about some relatively minor changes to the legislation that governs disclosure in the United Kingdom. And we did that in order to provide the defence with disclosure before the first hearing. And we were successful in that endeavour. And we have much fewer problems with disclosure in the summary justice magistrates court system than we do in the Crown Court. IDPC, sorry, it's another acronym. You'll all have them. It stands for Initial Details of the Prosecution Case. So this is the evidence upon which we rely. We want to give it to the defence as quickly as possible. Often, we do not know who defends until the first hearing in court. In only 20% of cases do we know who defends before that time. So we have a challenge still to get the prosecution case to defence, because we can't do that if we don't know who they are. We need a better defence culture where they engage with the prosecution before the first hearing. Too often everything starts happening at court on the first hearing when it could be done in advance. The last bullet point here about defence self-service, our plan, this I confess, should have been in place in 2017. It still isn't in place, but the idea is that we upload the prosecution case to effectively a cloud, and the defence have access code and password, and they go into the cloud and download the material themselves. So we don't give it to the defence, they go and take it. It is astonishing to me that here we are in 2019 when my young daughter can go onto YouTube and access almost anything, mostly inappropriate. The defence can't go and get the details they need from the prosecution. I am sure that is different in many of your jurisdictions. But we're still working on it. Still continuing with unused material. The disclosure review, if any of you ever want to find out about how disclosure works in England and Wales, There's a document called the Disclosure Review, which was jointly commissioned. 2014 sets out, from a judicial perspective, how disclosure works and then how it should work. And it was of great assistance to us in shaping TSJ. This document in the middle, the Streamlined Disclosure Certificate, this is the document we went to the government for, and then to politicians, House of Parliament, House of Lords, because we wanted a simple document that reflects the fact that disclosure in summary justice cases is much simpler than it is in the Crown Court. So we came up with this certificate, which we give to the defence, where we know who defends before the first hearing. And then we have the last point, which is the National Disclosure Improvement Team, which is comprised of the most senior prosecutors, including the Director of Public Prosecutions, Max Hill, and Chief Constables. And they have oversight of disclosure across England and Wales, which helps ensure that suspects and defendants have their rights looked after. Just a quick one on digital working. We didn't have Wi-Fi in courts. We still, I'm afraid, don't have Wi-Fi in most of our offices. But we do have Wi-Fi in court, and for us, it enabled us to do things very differently. It enabled us to deal with cases in real time rather than waiting until we bring cases back to the office with all the delay that ensues. We can transfer documents digitally to other parties, and we have an online, in the cloud, central repository, although the defence can't access it. But for us, digital working was the great enabler for summary justice to move more quickly. I just want to touch here upon what we see and have agreed with the police are the key characteristics for them when it comes to dealing with summary justice. The first one, which I hope will be familiar to all of you, is good file quality. Makes such a difference. But securing good file quality is a big challenge. We've been working at it for over 30 years, still not there. The next point is really important. This was new for everyone. Correct anticipation of plea. Excuse the acronym. GAP, G-A-P, means guilty anticipated plea. We think the defendant will plead guilty. NGAP stands for not guilty anticipated plea. We think the defendant will plead not guilty. And in preparation for TSJ, we decided to treat cases differently according to what type of plea we think will be entered. So when it comes to GAP cases, we give the defence very little. We give them a summary, and we give them their previous convictions, and that's all. The intention is that they will plead guilty. Of course, they don't have to, but they plead guilty, and we put less effort into those cases because they are in and out of the system like that. The not guilty cases require much more work, and we gather everything together which we need to prove our case, together with the unused material, and we provide that to the defence early. The next point about brigading of cases, that means how we have the cases listed in court. So we agreed with the courts, and especially with the judges, that we would have GAP courts put into, GAP cases put in a GAP court. So everyone knows every case in there is likely to be the same outcome. And we put NGAP cases into a dedicated court with a specially trained prosecutor who can deal with the case management that's necessary. And we also agreed with the courts how many cases should go into those. So we aim for 30 cases in a day for a GAP court and 15 in an NGAP court, because there's more to do. We wanted to bring about this change because before TSJ happened, cases were listed in a chaotic and random fashion, and we never knew where to put our prosecutorial resource. This was a game changer for us. It relies upon the police accurately forecasting the plea. We've worked really hard with the police. They are good at it now. We've given them detailed guidance. In over 90% of cases, the police make the right prediction. It works. I confess I wasn't sure it would, but it works. The police need to complete the disclosure certificate properly. They're getting better, still not perfect. And they need to provide us with support in NGAP courts. So the case which we think will be not guilty, we need access to the police to put things right if they haven't given us everything that we need. We keep on top of all this. I won't go through all of this, but we keep on top of this so that the initiative doesn't fail by looking at the data every single month and looking in depth at the data every quarter. We have a great deal of data. I can give you the percentage of police files that are of acceptable quality, not just nationally, but by reference to every single police force, of which we have 42, and every subunit within every police force. We can tell them how good they are at anticipating plea. We can identify how many cases fall outside the model of 15 and 30 in a court. We can show the percentage of cases which don't have a properly completed disclosure certificate. By sharing that data, we influence police behaviours. I said earlier, we can't tell them what to do, but we can certainly influence them. Some of the changes that have happened, listed there. We've got Wi-Fi, that's great. The workload has fallen away, so although our budget is reduced by 33%, the workload's gone down by about 30% because the police budget reduced too. The cases coming to us now, you may have found this as well, are more complicated. There's more that we put in disclosure. Digital markup, don't worry about it, it's a court thing. These are the new challenges. I'm conscious of time, so I won't talk about them all in depth, but we're finding that PCRs, which is a postal charge requisition, is a new means to bring defendants to court. It's cheaper for the police. It's not bail. We have bail. But now, most cases reach court through a requisition, which is like a summons. And it was brought in by the person who was our Home Secretary and who is presently, but maybe not for much longer, our Prime Minister. So this was an initiative that came in, and it's had unintended consequences. It leads to delay, and it leads to other cases that fall outside the model that we've designed, and we're still wrestling with that. I've mentioned digital devices, iPhones, disclosure, because of the challenge they present. The devices we all have in our pocket, you can print out 30, 40, 50, 60,000 pages of material from it, and they are relevant in a growing number of cases. I just want to conclude on this slide that this initiative, TSJ, Transforming Summary Justice, has made really good progress. It's been reviewed by our inspectorate, it's been reviewed by the very senior judiciary, and it's been held up as best practice. It's a model that works. And it's been adopted in a different initiative called Better Case Management in the Crown Court for more complex work. The same principles work in the Crown Court as they do in the Magistrates' Court. So it's now very well embedded. But as I say on this slide, it's not yet business as usual. We still have big variations in performance in different parts of England and Wales. It is not yet consistent. And the risk is, like the initiatives which I showed earlier, such as Glidewell, NARI, Stop Delaying Justice, the risk is that this initiative falls away. And so one thing that I've learned from this, which is a lesson which I will take with me wherever I go, is that there is an immense challenge in developing and implementing and sustaining long-term cultural change. Because this isn't about process. Process is part of it. It's about what goes on in people's heads when they come to court. And that's what we've tried to change. So, we'll keep at it. Thank you very much.